All right, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. Welcome back. Have a nice weekend. Anything fun? Dallas, Houston? Anyone care? Oh, yeah. And I'm not doing so good today? No. Oh, okay. Let's see. Anything non-football this weekend that was fun? Anything interesting? Did that start already? Is there basketball still? Wow. Okay. Yeah, I always just have the billboards for like Dwight Howard and James Harden right on 59 and like nowhere else. I'm pretty sure that's their route to work, if I had to guess. Like, I'm guessing they have to drive past those billboards in sequence. That, Dwight's is closer to the stadium, just, for the whatever, inflate the ego above the billboard. So, it actually keeps them in check. Because I've not seen those billboards really anywhere else. I just didn't. Are they? Because I know right 59 loop coming right to the stadium, they're there. Anyway, that's my guess. All right, let's see. Anything on your minds? What's questions, things you're worried about? All right. So our goal for today is to finish up future interests. And we're doing probably the trickiest element of future interests, okay? And I've been trying to build you sequentially step by step, right? We started with the present interests, then we did some future interests, and then some more future interests. Today, we're doing the most complicated type of future interest, which is called the executory interest. And I made a very deliberate plea to you, do not mention those in class before today. A couple of you tried, and I told you don't do it. So today, I'm going to actually make you learn this last topic, okay? So the trickiest part about this is you've needed to internalize every single rule we've done so far, okay? All the rules about remainders, contingent and invested, all the rules about feasible determinables, you need to have those cold, okay? And I've been harping upon you this for the last 2 weeks or so. So I'm going to assume that all of you have that pretty good, okay? If you don't, you really need to go back and review because today won't make as much sense. The reason why is that this last topic is very rule-based. You need to go comma by comma, look for very specific words, understand the difference between a condition precedent and the difference between a condition subsequent, okay? If you don't get all those little nuances, this last topic won't make sense. All right, so I will hope you have learned everything we've done so far, and if you haven't, then maybe, Lord help you. Okay. Or you can come talk to me afterwards, but you should at least have this much. So what I want to do is start off with this table and fill it in completely. Okay, and I'm going to probably do most of this myself because we've done this, a number of times. But if you don't get one of the steps I put in, I want you to raise your hand and stop me, okay? All right, so and again, this is the exact same table we're working on now for like basically almost 2 weeks. All right, so we all know the fee simple is represented by something like this, to A and his heirs, right? We all know that the duration is forever, and then the future interest is in A's heirs. Okay, no difficulty there. Okay, the life estate though, it gets a little bit trickier when you talk about the future interests because there are two different kinds of future interests. There are remainders that are vested, and there are remainders that are contingent, and there's also the reversion. Okay, so let's walk through each one. So we know that generally speaking, the duration of the life estate is the life of A. That's the easier part. Okay, so the most simple example is like this. I'll number them because we have several. From O to A for life. Okay, this is the most simple one. But this one we know that A has a life estate, and we also know that O has what's called reversion. Okay, how do we know this? You have to memorize this. When you have life estate and the future interest goes back to the grantor, it's called reversion. Right? That we did 2 weeks ago. All right, everyone with me so far? Okay. So let's do a second example. Okay. Let's do this. To A for life, then to B and his heirs. Okay. So again, we know that the present interest is that A has a life estate. What about the future interest, right? Well, when the future interest files a life estate, adds in a third party, we know it's called a remainder, right? So we know that B has remainder. Okay? But that's not all. We have to keep going. Is this a vested remainder or a contingent remainder? You recall that in order to determine if it's vested or contingent, we ask two questions, right? Are the people ascertained? Are they named? And in this case, the answer is yes. We know B is named, okay? Is there any kind of condition precedent, right? Is there anything that comes before B getting it? And the answer is no. We read to A for life, comma, then to B and his heirs. There's no condition precedent, right? Therefore, this is a vested remainder. Everyone see that? If you don't, stop me. This is from last week. All right. So let's try. Let's try another example. Let's try. I'll call this one 3. And this doesn't quite line up, but you'll make it look pretty in your notes. So it's like this: to A for life, then to B. I'm sorry. Then to B's heirs. Let's do this one. Okay. So again, we know, easy enough. A has a life estate. Yeah, there's no dispute about that. A has a life estate. Okay. Now about the future interest. Again, whenever you have following a life estate going to a third party, it's going to be some sort of remainder, right? So B's heirs have a remainder, but we need to be more precise in that. Okay. Are the heirs ascertained? Well, the answer to that question is no. We don't know who B's heirs are until B dies, right? Therefore, this is a B's heirs have contingent remainder because they're not ascertained. Okay, everyone see this? Stop me if you don't. Everyone get this? Okay. Let's try number 4, another example. So it's like this. From O to A for life, then to B and his heirs if he graduates before A dies. Okay? So this is a slightly different situation. In this situation, we start off again. We say, okay, O has life estate. I'm sorry, A has life estate. No question there. Okay? What about B? Well, we know that following a life estate, if it goes to a third party, B has some sort of remainder, right? That's easy. We don't know what kind of remainder, though, yet. So how do we decide what kind of remainder has? Well, look like this. It says from O to A for life, comma. Then to B and his heirs if he graduates before A dies. In other words, before B gets it, he would have to have graduated. That is a condition precedent, right? It's a condition precedent. And because it's a condition precedent, that must be what kind of remainder? Contingent, yes, right. So we say this is contingent remainder because there's a condition precedent in there, okay? And let's round it out, right? Let's say O is a slacker. Let's say B is a slacker, and he doesn't graduate on time. What interest does O retain here? How do we know it's reversion?
Because that's the original owner.
What was the first life estate? This is the trick. What was the first life estate? I'm sorry, I can't remember. What was the first estate called? A life estate. Whenever there's a life estate, the grantor always has reversion. Okay? This was example number 1. So I'll scroll up for a second, right? Whenever the first one's a life estate, the grantor has reversion. Okay? This is why these get really tricky. You need to remember each rule stacked one on top of the next.
So the grantor always has reversion?
When there's a life estate followed by contingent remainder, there's reversion. Okay, so let me ask you this one. Look at this one, right? So this one's like this. This is second example. So it says from O to A for life, then to B and his heirs, right? Why does O have no reversion here? It's a vested remainder. There's no chance. There's a 0% chance that O will ever get it back in this situation.
Okay.
Everyone get that? Stop me if you don't. If you want to go back after class and go through these 4 or 5 examples, I strongly recommend you do that. Okay? Because this you need to be able to do fluently. Okay? Everyone with me so far? Okay. We also discussed what were called the defeasible estates, which were the fee simple determinable and the fee simple subject condition subsequent. So we know that the fee simple determinable had to do with a sort of durational word, right? So long as, So long as some condition is satisfied. And we say like this, from O to A, so long as it's used as a school or whatever, right? Okay. What is the future interest that's matched up with a fee simple determinable? Again, you need to know this. It's called possibly reverter, right? So we say that A has a fee simple determinable. Future interest, O has a possibility of reverter. I'll make this on one screen so you can see. You need to remember that. When the present interest is called a fee simple determinable, the future interest is called possibly reverter. That you need to have cold. So O has a possibly reverter, okay? And the important part of the fee simple determinable is that it's automatic, right? It's automatic. As soon as that condition is breached, it goes from A to O instantly, right? There's no requirement to take any extra steps. Everyone get me so far? Okay. Let's finish up the table for now. Oh, I got a haircut about 2 weeks ago, but I appreciate that.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Why?
Not very observant. I don't know. Yeah, I got a haircut. Maybe it was last week, but I think you've seen me since. Anyway, maybe not. Have you? Wait a minute. Now, when did I get it? Oh, you're right. You haven't seen me since. Okay, withdrawn. Okay, can't remember. Okay, so let's talk about the fee simple subject condition subsequent. Right? These are conditional words. Okay? If a condition is satisfied or whatever. Right? If on the condition that provided, however, these kind of conditional words. And we see something like this, right? Okay, from O to A, but if it's not used as a school, then whatever, right? Or actually, let me say whatever. But if it's not used as a school, it reverts to O, something like that, right? Be a little more precise. Okay. Here we know that the present interest, A has what's called a fee simple subject to condition subsequent, and O has a future interest, which is called a yes. O has a right of entry. Okay. And the key about the right of entry is it's not automatic, right? It's not automatic. You have to actually take steps in order to legally enter the property. That means going to court. Don't worry about details beyond that, but you have to go to court. All right? All right, everyone get that much so far. I realize this was a lot, but this is our past 2 weeks in one table, and which you should have committed. Yes?
I thought we were only supposed to use the word revert.
Oh, you caught me. You caught me. Goes back. You caught me. You got me. I fell for my own trap. Okay. Okay. Everyone okay with this so far? So I want to draw attention to one thing which you maybe didn't realize, but I was very deliberate with my examples. Whenever I gave you a fee simple determinable or a fee simple subject condition subsequent, the future interest was always in the grantor. O always had the future interest. You may or may not have noticed that, but I did not give you a single example where you had a fee simple determinable or a fee simple subject condition subsequent where there was a third party, right? The only time I gave you any kind of third parties was the life estate. The reason why was because I was trying to shield you from the executory interests. I was trying to protect you as long as I could, but I can do that no longer, okay? Right? So we've done this many times. We've done, right, life estate plus remainder in third party, right? We've done that many times, but we've not done a fee simple determinable plus a future interest in a third party. I'm not going to call it anything yet because I don't want to scare you, right? Our goal for today is to try and look at this latter category when the first interest is some sort of fee simple determinable or some sort of defeasible state, and then what comes after it, okay? The reason why this makes a difference is because of the nature of a life estate. everyone dies. I said this before. Everyone dies. Eventually, a life estate will come to a natural termination whenever the person dies. And then the next person gets it, either remainder, vested, or contingent. Okay? But with a defeasible estate, like a fee simple determinable, there's no guarantee that it ends. It may go on forever, it may not. It's something of a mystery, right? So in order to deal with the fact that these may go on forever, the way executory interests are structured is that the third party can cut short the present estate. Let me say it again, right? With a life estate and someone has a remainder afterwards, the remainder man can't do anything to accelerate getting the land short of killing the person, right? Which is usually not a very good idea. But short of this person dying, nothing can happen. What makes executory interest different is that the third party can cut short the interest of the present estate, right? The person who has it now can get it cut short. The present estate might end before death. And then it goes not to the grantor, but to a third party. Okay? Everyone with me so far? All right. So I want to take a look at, in your book, go to page 283, please. I want to walk through examples 6, 7, and 8. We'll be on these for a while, but I want to walk through 6, 7, and 8 because it really illustrates. The example's better if I understand executory interest than actually explaining in words. I'll tell you about Henry VIII later if you like, but for now let's talk about examples 6, 7, and 8. All right, where did I finish last time? I remember. I saw you there. Oh, you were the last one. Okay, so I'll jump down over here. All right, so Eric, just go ahead and read example 6, but don't read the answer, please. Just read the first sentence. Resist the urge.
O conveys to A for life, then to B and her heirs if B survives A.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this is just like we did last week. So let's break down the estates, right? So Eric, how do we describe A's estate?
Life estate.
Very good. A is a life estate, okay? Then we get to a comma, and we know now we're talking about B. B has some sort of future interest. Eric, what do you call the future interest in a third party after a life estate? Let's go specific generally. What do you call the future interest in a third party after a life estate? Remainder, yes. We know at this point that B has remainder. How do we know this? Because, and trust me on this one, whenever there's a life estate, the third party interest afterwards is called remainder, okay? But now let's get more precise, Eric. Is this a contingent or a vested remainder? And walk me through your thinking on that.
Well, I know first we've specified the party.
Uh-huh.
Now
it's ascertained. Okay, so first is ascertained. Is there any kind of condition precedent? In other words, is there any condition that has to happen before A gets it? I'm sorry, B gets it.
No, sir.
Oh, is there?
Well, I mean, I thought that when it's a life estate prior to, we don't give account to the simple death of the first holder.
Okay. So it says to A for life, then to B and her heirs if B survives A. What do we do with that if B survives A?
I actually hung myself up on that. Then I'm assuming that it becomes contingent.
That is a condition precedent, right? How do we know this? Let's look very carefully. It says to O for A for life, comma, then to B and her heirs if B survives A. Eric, if B is dead before A, is there any way that B's heirs ever get it? That's right. The answer is no. This is a condition precedent. This right here, if B survives A, is a condition precedent. What's one cheating way of finding this? There's no comma separating it. Trust me on this one. This actually will help you until you really get it, right? This is all one clause. Then to B and her heirs if B survives A. That is intrinsically a condition precedent. B only takes it if that condition precedent is satisfied. All right, so you're eight, you're batting 1,000, right? So if it's true that it's condition precedent, how do we characterize B's interest? Just so we said A is a life estate. What is B's future interest called?
Would it be a contingent fee simple?
Contingent remainder and fee simple. All right, everyone see that? B has contingent remainder and fee simple. And if you want to cheat, you can read the next sentence. It says it. But try not to read ahead. Let's at least pretend to do this correctly. Okay. All right. Everyone see that? Eric got that exactly right. A is life estate. B as contingent remainder, and fee simple. Everyone see that? Okay. All right, Rachel. Let's work on example number 7. Okay. So just read it first and don't read the answer.
O conveys to A for life, then to B in her heirs if B survives A, and if B does not survive A, to C in his heirs.
Okay, so we can do this one, right? We've actually done everything. I know this one might look a little tricky, so let's start the easy one. Rachel, what's A's estate?
A life estate.
Okay, so whenever we have a life estate, what is the future interest in third party going to be called, just generally? Okay, everyone get that? You need to do that in your head. When you see life estate plus something else, say, okay, you have a remainder. If you tell me that much, you've done like half the question correctly. You get some points in the test, right? The other stuff gets harder, but if you get nothing else, that will get you like half points. All right, Rachel then says, comma, then to B and her heirs if B survives A. What do we make of that? How would we characterize B's remainder?
I think it's a contingent remainder because we've got that if B survives A, which is the condition subsequent.
Beautiful, perfect. Yeah, and this is the exact thing Eric just said a minute ago, right? We have this clause, then to B and her heirs if B survives A. That is a contingent, condition precedent, therefore must be contingent remainder. Okay. Now we get to a third one, Rachel, to try and trip you up, right? This last comma, and if B does not survive A to C and his heirs. So I didn't ask this to Eric, but let's go back to question 6 for a second, right? What's O's interest in question 6? What's O's future interest in question 6?
Reversion.
How do we know? That's right. How do we know it's reversion?
Well, because I guess because the remainder is contingent. So if B doesn't get the remainder, then it goes back.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And this is our chart. Whenever you have the grantor give a life estate and the future interest is contingent, he keeps a reversion. That's exactly right. So Rachel, in question number 7, does O have any future interest?
What I asked you about last time. Well, okay, so I think that if we're looking at both contingent remainders stacked on top of each other, because I think that second part to C is also the contingent remainder.
It is.
And I don't see how O could have reversion.
That's right. Okay, you're right, but let's walk through this. So you're right. B's interest is contingent, right? Because there's a condition precedent, so we know it's contingent. Then you have another one stacked. You can stack these one on top of the other. They're very, very naughty like that, right? So what happens when you have the second contingent remainder? How does this work? What logistically, when does C ever get the land? What's C's path to owning Blackacre?
So C gets the land if B does not survive A.
Yes.
So then after A is life estate, it goes to C.
Yes. Okay. So we say that C has a remainder, a contingent remainder in fee simple, right? And just like Rachel said a second ago, C's path is if B dies early. If B dies before A, then C's got in the bag, right? So it's not vested, it may not happen, but it's contingent on that condition precedent on, as it says, B not surviving A. Okay? These are what are called actually alternate contingent remainders. I don't even want you to use that word. It gives you one more thing to work out. But when you stack contingent remainders, you see one gets it after the other. And here, O has no interest. O has no reversion. Yes?
When you specify that C has a contingent remainder in fee simple, you didn't say that B had a contingent remainder in fee simple.
That's correct.
Is it in fee simple as well?
Yes. How do we, Judson, how do we know it's in fee simple? Yeah, B and her heirs. Exactly. It says B and her heirs. That's fee simple right there.
Okay, that's one thing.
It's not always. If Justin, this said to B for life, B would have a contingent remainder in life estate. More often than not, you'll see it like this.
So only when the contingent remainders are stacked, that's when the reversion is nullified and O no longer has reversion. If there's only one contingency, then O can make.
I wouldn't generalize like that, but that's correct. Don't try to make rules.
Well,
Yeah, but that's correct. But I'm going to give you something a little bit easier in about 5 minutes. Okay?
Okay.
I'm going to give you something a little bit easier, but you're thinking right on target.
For purposes of an extent, we want to, let's say, break out the first part and say, okay, in this case, the reversion, but once it goes to the alternative,
Yes.
remainder, then
Yes, yes. So if I gave you example 6 or example 7 in the exam, you'd have to explain at each step. Like, I want to know what's O's interest, what's A's interest, what's B's interest, what's C's interest, right? All right. All right, let's go on to do example 8, okay? Example 8 introduces a new topic. I don't particularly like the way the book just randomly dropped this topic. And any of you read like, where did that come from, right? That was my experience, right? When I read this, I was like, so I try to build you up, and I deliberately didn't tell you about it. So again, every single example I've given you, right, was always, you know, not some sort of weird interest in a third party that cuts short the present one, right? An executory interest is an interest in a third party that will cut short the previous estate. Okay? So let's go back up to example 6 and 7 for a second, right? Both in example 6 and 7, right? A has it for life, right? There's not any question that A will have it for his entire natural life. The only way for B to get it is when A dies, if some other conditions are satisfied. But B can't cut short A's life unless he kills him, in which case you usually can't inherit land when you result in killing the person. Okay? Example 8 is something very different, right? So it starts off like this. It says to A for life, okay? That much is settled. You always have a life estate that's in place, okay? But then we have something different, and pay attention to the commas. Okay? Then to B and her heirs, comma. There's a difference. Let's be very deliberate. I don't know if I can show them both at the same time if I zoom out a little bit. No, I can't. I'll show it differently, right? So here it says, then to B and her heirs if B survives A, right? Then to B and her heirs if B survives A. It was all in a single clause. There was no comma separating them. Okay? If you scroll down to number 8, if you look in your books, it might be a little bit easier to see at the same time. It says to A for life, then to B and her heirs, comma. Okay, that makes a very significant difference. I know you might think, what's the difference, Josh? Trust me, the commas make a big difference, right? Why? I told you as you read left to right, stop at the commas, and I want you to evaluate the estates at each comma. All right, so Jordan, let's walk through this, okay? And I only want you to go comma by comma. Don't go anything past the comma. So O conveys for life, okay?
Right.
Easy one. What's A's interest called? Life. Yes, A has a present life estate, all right? Then it says, then to B and her heirs, comma, stop. What is B's interest there?
Does it have a...
Just read, if you had seen this phrase in isolation with nothing else, right? Then to B and her heirs. Let's say it stopped there. What would B have? Fee simple. Okay? You're exactly right. I want you to fight the urge to read past the commas. B has a fee simple, right? Now, remember in the last class we discussed something called a fee simple subject to open. Remember where you can leave land to children, and however many children are alive at the time of the death, you can add people to the class, right? So you have this notion that even though someone has fee simple, it can be subject to some condition, right? It can be subject to more kids being born. It's exactly the same thing here. What actually happens is B does have a fee simple, but it's subject, right? It's subject to be taken away. Even though if you just read this clause, B has fee simple, B may not keep it. Why? Because if B does not survive A, then C gets it. C can actually take away B's fee simple. C can, as we say in the lingo, divest. C can divest B's fee simple. Right? How does C divest B's fee simple? If B dies. No fault of her own, right? So what we actually say is that B has fee simple, right? That's subject to divestment, right? B's future interest is a fee simple subject to divestment, right? But let's be, everyone see that? We know that B has, in the future, will have a fee simple subject to divestment. Everyone see that? And let's be more precise. So Jordan, we know that after A is a life estate, what do you call the future interest in a third party? No. What do you call the future interest following a life estate in a third party?
See the word, I just can't remember the name, the word.
Steven, you got it?
Remainder.
Okay, good, you got
Sorry.
it. No, it's good. Remainder, okay? So we know, and let's follow our rules very clearly. So let's try and classify this, okay? So we know that A has a life estate. Following a life estate, it goes to a third party. So we know that B has a remainder, okay? And I'll leave Jordan alone now. So let's say Steven. So let's look. Okay, so we know that this is a remainder. Is it a vested remainder or a contingent remainder? And don't read the answer. Okay, how do you know it's a vested remainder? Let's go through our two answers, right? Is the person ascertained, number one? Okay, here's a tricky one. Is there a condition precedent? There is no condition precedent. What kind of condition is there?
It's a condition
Subsequent. Exactly right. There is no condition precedent here. How do we know this, Stephen? Where does the condition come? After the comma. Ah, right. The condition comes after the comma, this but if. So this is not a contingent remainder, right? It's a vested remainder. So let's walk through this a little bit slowly, right? B has a vested remainder in fee simple subject to divestment, right? We know for sure that B has a vested remainder, and that vested remainder is in fee simple because it's and his heirs. But this comma comes afterwards, provides a condition subsequent, right? So that is a vested remainder in fee simple subject to divestment. I know that's tricky. There are a lot of steps in that, but you need to see that, right? We go comma by comma. A, life estate. Oh, that right there. B has fee simple, right? And we know it's a remainder because it comes after a life estate. And we know it's vested because it's ascertained there's no condition precedent. But we don't stop there. We have to keep going, right? This fee simple is now subject to some other condition. It's subject to divestment. It might be divested by C. Everyone see that? Stop me if you don't. Raise your hand, please. Everyone see that? I didn't see it my first time I looked at this, so I'm glad you do. This is not easy, right? I'm about to move on, so if you don't see it, stop me. Yeah.
So does, in this case, does
Let's not get to O yet. We'll get to O in a second. I didn't do C yet, because before you get to O, you need to do C. Okay, I saw another hand, I think.
Can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah. A has life estate, right? B has a vested remainder in fee simple, subject to divestment, right? And if you want, it's written in the next sentence, but I don't want you to cheat yet. So if you didn't listen to me, yeah.
So whenever we have a vested remainder, and then after the comma we have a condition subsequent, we assume that it would be a vested remainder in fee simple subject to divestment.
Yes. Yes. Right. So everyone gets that. Everyone get B's interest, right? All right. Now I want to do C's interest, right? Okay. We haven't done this before, but we're going to do it now. C has what's called an executory interest. C has an executory interest, right? Remember I said 5 minutes ago, an executory interest means that a third party is cutting short some sort of estate, some sort of defeasible estate, right? An executory interest means a third party is cutting short some sort of defeasible estate, right? We know that at some point in the future, B will have a fee simple subject to divestment. We get that, right? And C may cut that short. If C cuts that short, then C gets it. So we say that C has an executory interest that becomes possessory when it cuts short B's estate. Okay? Don't worry about the shifting part now. We'll get to the shifting in a couple minutes. But everyone see that C is cutting short, right? B's estate. That's what you call an executory interest. Okay? All right, everyone see that? So, yeah,
How
Justin.
does C cut the estate short if it's up to B to live or not? C has no control over that, so I don't understand how C is cut short.
I don't mean that she's actually literally cutting it short himself. It's that C can take it away from B. So let's compare and contrast 7 and 8. Let's go back and forth a few times. I think that'll make it clear. Okay? It's the exact same outcome, but the phrasing is different. Okay? The outcome's exactly the same between 7 and 8. The same exact thing happens. In 7, it says to Ophe for life, then to B and her heirs if B survives A, and if B does not survive A, to C and his heirs, right? And we said that there they have 2 contingent remainders. And we know they're contingent because there's a condition precedent built right in, right? 8 is the exact same outcome. The only difference is that the condition comes after the grant, a fee simple. That makes it a vested remainder. And when you have a vested remainder, it's going to be followed by an executory interest. So let me give you these pairings that may actually help, okay? And I'll explain this in much more detail, right? These pairings, they may help you, they may confuse you, I don't know, but I'll give them to you, right? Whenever you have the first future interest as contingent remainder, the second one will almost 99% be a contingent remainder. I mean, it's not 100%, but you're at 99% here, and this is good enough for law students, right? Okay. When the first one is going to be contingent remainder, the second one will also be contingent remainder. Okay. When the first one is a vested remainder, the second one will be an executory interest. You can pretty much take this to the bank. This is 99% going to be the case. When you have them stacked like that, and the first one's contingent, the second one effectively has to be contingent, right? When the first one's vested, and there's some third party lurking in the background, you can describe the third party's interest as executory. All right, everyone with me so far? I know this is not easy. This is probably the trickier classes of the semester, so we'll go nice and slow. Okay. Everyone with me so far? All right. Let's try. Let's try some examples. Yeah, go for it.
So you said fee simple determinable plus future interest in third party, that's the executory interest. But that's not the only executory interest you can have. You can have executory interest in anything that is.
So the correct phrase, and I'll try not to overwhelm too much, is feasible defeasible. Any sort of defeasible fee, in other words, a fee that can cut short, plus a future interest in third party. This future is called executory interest. Let me do some examples. I know this. Whenever I try to generalize too much, it becomes wrong because things become very specific. So I'm going to resist your urges to try to make things generalized. Okay. All right. Let's try. Let's try some examples. Let me find a good one that's not too hard. I'm going to not do the stuff on Henry VIII now. I might come back to it later in class if I have some time, but we'll leave that for now. Okay. Let's try example 14. It's just on page something. If you get the page, shout it out.
290.
Okay, very good.
214.
Yeah, example 14. This is the modern one. All right. So, Shelley, can you read example 14? Just the question. Don't read the answer.
Okay, O conveys to A and his heirs, comma, but if A dies without issue surviving him, comma, to B and her heirs.
Okay. All right. So let's look at this one very carefully. Okay. Okay. So we say that O conveys to A and his heirs. Okay. So this is different, right? Because we've always started off with a life estate. So this is throwing you a little bit of a wrinkle. We don't have a life estate there to start off with, which is not a problem. Okay, but some of your rules may not be as clearly defined, but we'll walk through this. Okay, Shelley? Okay, so just go comma to comma. O conveys to A and his heirs, right? If you stop right there, you say, oh yeah, A is fee simple. There's no issue. All I see is this, A and his heirs, A is fee simple, okay? Shelley, go on to the next comma, okay?
But if A dies without issue surviving him.
Yeah, okay, you can keep reading, yeah.
Okay, but if A dies without issue surviving him, to B and her heirs.
Okay, right? So we know that at present, right, it seems like A has a fee simple. But the fee simple has some sort of limitation coming after it. Shelley, is this a condition precedent or a condition subsequent? Where's this condition coming?
If A has children.
Right. So what, does it come before or after A gets it?
Oh, it comes before.
Okay. So what's interesting, right, is if we just read to A and his heirs, we stop there. This is tricky, right? It looks like A is a present estate, right? Shelley, does A have a present estate here? Does A get it today?
No.
See, oh yes, that's right. Here's the trick, right? See if we got this. At the present moment, Shelley, right? Who owns it? That's right. So what's interesting here, right, is that O is actually still owning it. This is a really weird wrinkle. A doesn't take it, right, until if we know we have issues surviving him. The only way we know if issues survive A is when A dies. So effectively, right, A will never get it. This is actually a future interest in A's heirs, which is fine. Well, if you look at it, right, it's a fee simple subject to divestment, right? It's to A and his heirs, right? But we don't know if the condition's met until A dies. In other words, A doesn't get to hold on to it until he dies. This is actually a situation where A's future interests will take it for him. I know it seems very odd. Why would O do this, right? Why would O retain this for himself? So these are these bizarre property issues. So we say that A actually has. Oh, let's say this, right? So Shelley, let's go on to B's interest, right? How would we characterize B's interest? I'll come back to you in a second. How would I characterize B's interest here?
B has like a future.
What is B? What is B's interest doing here? Think. What estate is cutting short? What is B's estate cutting short?
A's interest.
Right. So A's interest. So B is actually cutting short A's estate. What do we call a future interest that cuts short the feasible estate? No.
Oh,
What's the new thing we did today?
oh, executory.
Interest, right? So let's write this out, okay? I know this is not intuitive at all, which is why these examples are pretty good, right? So we say that A has a future interest. It's really A's heirs, right? Because A will not be around when he gets it. But in property law, that doesn't matter much, right? So A's heirs, right? They have a fee simple, okay? And stuff comes after that. I'm not done with that yet, okay? And Shelley said it correctly that B has an executory interest. Okay? Everyone see that? We know that A has some sort of fee simple that's subject to some sort of condition that comes after it, and B has an executory interest. Everyone with me? The trick here, right, and what makes this topic so difficult is you can't define A's interest until you know B's. So if you know that B has an executory interest, what we then say is that A is a fee simple subject to B's executory interest. One second, I'll get you in a second. The way we characterize A's interest is by looking at what B has. And this is one of the least intuitive aspects of this topic. This isn't just subject to divestment, right? It's specifically subject to B's executory interest because B's executory interest is what's cutting it short.
Doesn't an executory interest always?
Right, exactly. That's right. It always does. Well, it's not. So, but we call it it's a fee simple subject to this executory interest.
Right, but you said it's not a fee simple subject to divestment because it's are you always, is it always going to be subject to executory interest?
Okay, so let me explain like this, right? Fee simple subject to divestment is a very general way of saying it.
That's just more specific.
This is more specific, and I'm trying to build you sequentially, right? You can call it a fee simple subject to divestment. That would be correct. But the most accurate way of describing it is to say that A's heirs, right, has fee simple subject to B's executory interest. Okay? Eric, your hand was up. I don't know if I stole your question.
I'm really confused on why B doesn't have current full-blown interest since we've got the comma separating it.
Okay, well, let's go back to it, right?
I'm sorry, A. To A and his heirs, comma, but if A dies.
This is one of the vagaries of property law, right? This isn't a fee simple determinable, right? Imagine like this, right? To A and his heirs, so long as A dies without children or something, right? Here, what actually is happening is that until we ascertain if there's issues surviving him, we don't know if A gets it, and O actually holds on to it. So that entire stuff I asked you to skip reading, if you go back to it, you will actually see stuff about how people would actually hold property until children are born in the future. Okay? What's effectively happening here, and then this is a way of describing it, O doesn't necessarily trust A. O doesn't ever want A to take it during his natural life. O wants this for A's kids, right? To put this in plain English. So O actually holds on to it, right? O actually has a present interest until we can ascertain if A died with issue. Okay? Yeah, if you want, you can go back and read all the stuff by Henry VIII. But effectively what this is trying to accomplish is A never gets it. This is a present for A's kids. Don't. Next class, you'll see why we can't do that. The answer to that question, I think someone asked it last week, is rule against perpetuities. Okay?
But the comma doesn't protect his possession. Because, I mean, it says to A and his heirs, then the comma separates.
So remember what I said a minute ago, right? In order to know what A's interest is, right, you need to figure out what B's interest is first. So even though you stop at the comma, you keep reading afterwards. So in order to define the present interest, you need to know what the future one is also. You can't define A's interest in the abstract. You can't define A's interest by itself. You need to look to what the B has.
But just to understand correctly, the reason why it's not a fee simple subject to a condition subsequent is because B's interest is what cuts short the.
Yes, exactly. So in every example, and that's a very good question, every example we did with a fee simple subject condition subsequent, right? And I was very deliberate, and you yelled at me about this 5 minutes ago, right? It was always from O to A, but if not used as school, goes back to O. That was every example I ever gave you for the fee simple subject condition subsequent. There was no third party there. It was always O had a right of entry. But when you throw a third party into the situation, it changes completely. Now you have a fee simple subject and executory limitation followed by an executory interest. Okay? That's why, very deliberately, in all the examples I gave you here, there was no third party. Once you throw a third party into the mix, it makes things very different. All right, so again, let's go back to this example. What's trying to happen here is O is saying, I don't want my son to have it while he's alive, but if my son dies with kids, you know, the heirs will get it, right? A's heirs will get it. Otherwise, B gets it. So during the present, O keeps it for himself. When A dies, you ascertain, does he have any kids? If he has kids, then the heirs of A get it, which, yeah.
So what if O dies before they?
Then O's heirs keep it.
But they don't really own it?
Well, O has it in fee simple, right? So if O dies, then his heirs hold it until we know who A's issue are. Try and think about this in terms of feudalism, and this will actually make it easier. O doesn't like A. O wants A's kids to have the land. So how do I cut A out of the picture, right? All these ways, and you'll see this for a class next week on Wednesday, were ways of avoiding the thing called the rule against perpetuities, the destruction of contingent remainders. There are all these rules put in place to try and prevent people from doing this, right? The government said, we don't want you holding land until someone else dies. It's very variable. Things may happen. You never know. So they said, you can't do this. You can't do that. So Alex, to answer your question, they came up with these freaking convoluted conveyances that don't make any sense, but somehow accomplish the very thing they're not supposed to do, right? There were lawyers 500 years ago who were saying, okay, how do we disinherit my son but let my grandkids keep it, right? That's basically it. How do I disinherit my son but let my grandkids keep it? That's what they came up with. And now 500 years later, I'm torturing you with this for reasons I couldn't even begin to explain, but I want you at least to appreciate what happens, okay? All right, let's go on to 15. Okay, all right. All right, Amanda, go for it.
O conveys to A for life, then to B and her heirs, but if B dies under the age of 21, to C and her heirs.
Okay, so stop right there, okay? So again, so we start off with a life estate. This is more familiar to you. So we know O to A for life estate. So Amanda, generally, what is B's interest going to look like? What's it going to be called broadly after life estate?
Remainder.
Yes, we know that B has remainder. Okay. Is there any kind of is the person ascertained?
Yes,
Right?
B is ascertained.
That's right. Okay. Is there a condition precedent?
No, it is to B and her heirs.
That's right. So what is the interest of B?
A vested remainder.
Perfect, okay? So we know that B has a vested remainder, okay? But we don't stop here, right? Because then we have this comma afterwards. We know B has a vested remainder. All right, Amanda, take it home. What happens to C? What exactly is C doing here?
But if B dies under the age of 21, to C and her heirs. So B has an executory interest that could
Good.
cut B's estate short
Yes,
with the condition that B dies under the age of 21.
exactly. So let me write out the interests here. I think you said them all correctly. Let me write them out very clearly. So this is example 15, right? Okay. So A has life estate. Okay, people always get that one right in the exam. Okay, A has a life estate, right? Okay. We know that B has a vested remainder, right? We don't know exactly what kind of vested remainder it is yet. We actually need to classify C. And we say that C has an executory interest, okay? Once we know that C has an executory interest, then we go back. We say that B has a vested remainder, right, subject to an executory interest. I'll be more precise, subject to C's executory interest. Okay, everyone see that? You need to jump around. You need to figure out what is C's interest in order to properly define B's interest. Everyone with me so far? Okay. Now I want to introduce a new term for you, right? In each of the cases that we've done, it was B's interest that was getting cut short. Okay? But that's not always the case. You may actually have examples where it's O's interest being cut short. Right? So I want to explain two different concepts. You have something called a shifting. This wasn't hard enough, right? The shifting executory interest and the springing executory interest. Okay? Why am I torturing you with these two terms? Okay, why am I giving you these additional things which you need to memorize? Because depending who's losing their interest is called something else, and you're going to need to know these different rules, okay? So a shifting executory interest is when the third party cuts short the grantee, right? A shifting executory interest, right, is when the third party cuts short the grantee. So let's go back to this question. In this one, right, to O for A for life, then to B and her heirs, but if B dies under the age of 21, to C and her heirs. In this one, B is the grantee. B is the person receiving it, right? Because C is cutting short B's interest, it's called a shifting executory interest. Okay? So if you want to be really precise, C's interest here is called a shifting executory interest. Okay? All right. I'll have an example in a few minutes to show you a spring. I don't have one handy right now, but I'll get to it in a few minutes. But we know that when the transferee's interest cut short, it's called shifting. And that you're going to have to memorize. Shifting and springing sound a lot alike. One way I try to remember it is like springing is from the grantor, right? So if you think of like a grantor, like the original person who gives it, it springs forward, right? It springs water, you know, the original grantor. There's no good way, you have to memorize it. But that's how I usually remember the difference between springing and shifting. So the methodology or the framework to characterize, for example number 15, right? So you first do the present state, which is the life estate, right? Then to B and her heirs, right? But if B dies in the age of 21, to C and her heirs. So you effectively have to figure out what C's interest, a shifting executory limit interest, to figure out what B's interest is. You have to jump around, which is not intuitive and it's somewhat annoying. Painful, right? So hand up. We're going to do a lot of examples for the rest of class. That should make things a little bit easier. So your hand up?
Oh, no.
Okay. All right. Let's do some more examples. Let's just go straight through this topic. Okay. All right. So Carrie, read example 16, please.
Open base to Hartford School Board, but if the premises are not used for school purposes during the next 20 years, town library.
Okay. So let's read this one at a time, right? So O conveys to Hartford School Board. So what's the interest of the school board there? How would you describe it?
Like a fee simple.
Okay, so it's a fee simple. Okay, right. It doesn't say the Harvard School Board and their heirs, but it may as well, right? So we say so. It's a fee simple, right? But what comes after that?
So it would be a, I believe, fee simple, such as condition subsequent.
Okay, that's not the right answer, but I'm glad you said that. Okay, I know you want to say condition to condition, a fee simple subject condition subsequent because you see the word but if, right? Remember what Amanda yelled at me for a few minutes ago, right? In all the examples when there's a fee simple subject condition subsequent, the interest goes back to the grantor, right? Let me go back to this chart, and I'll keep this is in your notes. I'm not making this up, right? Always, whenever you have the fee simple subject condition subsequent, the third party, there's no third party. Come on, Google, you're killing me. Whatever. It's in your chart, right? With the fee simple determinable and the fee simple subject condition subsequent, the interest that goes back always to the grantor. Okay? Here, it's different. Here, what's going on is you have O giving to the school board, and then if it's not to O, then it goes to the library. So when you have a third party. So once you see there's a third party, again, you have to cheat. You have to look ahead. Once you have a third party, Carrie, what is the future interest of the town library? How would we describe it?
It would be the executory
Good. Okay. So we know here that the library is an executory interest. How do we know this? Because it's cutting short the previous estate. Okay. So Carrie, since we know that the library has an executory interest, how would we describe the school board's interest? It is a fee simple, but specifically, what kind is it?
Is it feasible subject to fees executory interest?
Yes, perfect. Yes, and if you want to spell it out to the next sentence, right? B is the school board, right? Has fee simple, subject to executory interest. It's a fee simple subject to executory interest. And it will divest, right, when it's not used for school purposes during the next 20 years. Right? And this is automatic. It happens automatically. Okay, and it says here, it differs, you don't have to take any steps. This is automatic. Okay? We're with me, sir. Yeah.
Is that different from the other examples, the automatic parts?
With the fee simple subject executory interest, it's always automatic. Okay? It's on in that case, it's like the fee simple determinable and the possible reverter, but don't get them confused. But it's similar. Okay? Let's take a look at example 17. Okay? Emily, go for it. Read example 17, but not the answer.
Open base to Hartford School Board so long as the premises are used for school purposes, then to town library.
Okay, so this one mixes up what we've done in the past and what we've done in the future. Oh, I guess today is the future, right? So O conveys to Hartford School Board so long as the premises are used for school purposes, okay? Do you know by itself, just based on that, what it is? Can you tell me what the school board's estate is? Okay. So this is going to be a fee simple determinable, right? How do we know this? Because there's no comma separating it. Okay, so let's go back to 16. Okay? It says, remember, to Hartford School Board, comma, but if, here, it says to Hartford School Board so long as. So we have our plain old conventional fee simple determinable. This is what we've done 100 times, right? So we know that the school board is a fee simple determinable. But Emily, where this goes different is it doesn't go back to O. There's no possibly reverter, right? So who has a future interest here? Okay. What is the town library's interest? Okay, that's right. The town library has an executory interest. And that's why I kind of dodged Lou's question before, because I didn't want to get to this yet. But when we have a situation like this, whenever you have any kind of, scrolling's off, whenever you have any kind of defeasible fee plus some sort of future interest in a third party, it's called an executory interest. So let's go back to this example. You have a defeasible fee, which is a fee simple determinable, right? When it follows to a third party, the third party's interest is called an executory interest, right? And if you want the answer, it's right in the next sentence, right? 17. The school board has a fee simple determinable followed by an executory interest, and the town has an executory interest. Everyone get that? Yeah.
It says followed by an executor. I guess so. It seems kind of like, or I like thinking of it as subject to the executor interest because subject to it's like.
I say subject to.
Kind of thing. Because it is conditional. Like if they never, if they always use it for school purposes, then town library will never be able to exercise.
Right. So yeah. So the book uses a phrase which I don't like: a fee simple determinable followed by executory interest. I say a fee simple determinable subject to executory interest. You can use whichever one you like. I like subject for the reasons Lou just said. I think it makes it a little bit clearer because it's not really followed because it may not happen, right? So let's write out. This is example 16, right? So let's just spell it out here, right? Or no, 17, yeah. I did 16 already. So let's go scroll down. So we say again that the school has fee simple determinable, right? And the library has an executory interest. I'm sorry. The school has a fee simple determinable subject to the library's executory interest. Let me write this out. For some reason this is not scrolling normally. Okay, so we say that the school has a fee simple determinable subject to the library's executory interest. The library, actually, over there, Dylan. We say the library's executory interest. Is it springing or shifting? Who is it cutting short? The grantee or the grantor? Right. That's right. The library has a shifting executory interest. Okay? Because it's cutting short the grantee. In this case, the school. These are tricky. I accept that. The grantee has a shifting. I'm sorry. The library has a shifting executory interest. All right, everyone see that? Stop me if you don't.
So a definition of defeasible means that it's not set in stone.
So if you go back in your book, there's a definition of defeasible, say from like 2 or 3 classes ago, and it basically means an estate that may be cut short. But I don't want to give you a general definition because they have a lot of different kinds, right? You have the fee simple determinables, you have the fee simple subject to subsequence, you have the fee simple subject to divestment. There are a lot of different kinds. So it's some sort of fee that can be cut short. It's not, in other words, a defeasible fee is not a life estate. A life estate terminates on the dot, when the person dies. A defeasible fee terminates on some other condition.
So this is, if the town library's executive interest is cutting short the school board's interest, when would it be cutting short O's interest? I'm just confused on a springing, like how there's a springing.
I'll get to a spring example in a couple minutes. This is not a good example, but I will get to one in a few minutes. Okay, I'm trying to go sequentially through but I will get to that, I promise. Yeah.
What about the example that I sent you?
I don't remember it now. You can ask me after class.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a contingent remainder is or is not a defeasible fee?
A contingent remainder is in the future.
Right.
So when I mean defeasible, I mean something in the present.
Okay. All right.
Let's go on to the let's go on to some of these questions. Let's take a look at all right, let's try question number 1. There are several subparts. I want to do subpart A, and this might take a few minutes, but I think it'll be worthwhile. All right, Jonathan, read question 1, please, and through read question 1, please. On page 2, whatever, 92.
Okay. Owner of Wiseacre, comes to you to draft an instrument of gift. O tells you he wants to convey Wiseacre to his son A for life. And upon A's death, O wants Wiseacre to go to A's children, if any are alive, or if none are then alive,
to
O's daughter B. Consider the following conveyances, all carrying out O's intent, but creating different future entries.
Okay. All right. And we're going to be on this question for a while, so let's try to get the facts and understand them. So O is the owner of Wiseacre or whatever. Okay, says he wants to give it to his son for life, and on his son's death, he wants it to go to any of A's kids, his grandkids, if any are alive, and if none are alive, to O's daughter. So you see how he ranks his children. Now, this is fairly comical, right? So the first one says, O conveys to A for life, then to A's children and their heirs. But if at A's death, he is not survived by any children, then to B and their heirs. Okay? So at the time, so first let's say, at the time of this conveyance, A has no children. All right, so let's walk through this one step at a time. All right, Jonathan, so let's walk through this. Okay. So O conveys to A for life, right? What is A has, obviously? Okay. So then the next clause we see, then to A's children and their heirs. Okay. Well, what is the future interest that comes after life estate? Yeah, what is the future interest that comes after life estate? All right, you got to know this, guys. Calvin, let's walk. Okay, so go through. Okay, so we know that any future interest after life estate is called remainder, right? So then we have to say, is this a vested or a contingent remainder, right? So, yeah, 2 questions. So first, how do we know if it's a vested or contingent? What are those 2 questions?
Is a person identified, and they are A's children, and they're
Are there any children at the time this conveyance is drafted?
So it's not as contingent.
Okay, so here's the rub, right? At the time this is drafted, A does not have any children. That may change later. We'll revisit that in the next sentence, right? But for now, A has no ascertained kids. So we say that A's children, their heirs, have what kind of remainder, Calvin?
Contingent.
Okay, good. All right, so go to the next clause, right, Calvin? It says, but if at A's death, he has not survived any children, then to B and their heirs, right? How do we describe B's future interests? So we know that the first future interest is contingent remainder, right?
Right.
What's that trick I showed you before? What's that pairing?
It's,
These will help you, I promise.
it's a contingent. It's another contingent remainder.
Yes. This you can take to the bank. When you have a life estate with one contingent remainder, there's like a 99% chance the second one will also be contingent remainder, right? I mean, it's not 100, but this is, any example I give you, this will be the right answer. So we say that B has a contingent remainder in fee simple, right? I'm sorry, A has contingent remainder in fee simple, and then B has contingent remainder in fee simple, right? There are 2 stacked contingent remainders, which is virtually always going to be the case.
So, Professor, so A, similar to that other question I was asking about, A doesn't have any, he doesn't have fee simple at this point?
A, well,
And his offspring?
well, no, A has a life estate.
Okay.
A has a life estate, right? All right, so Marcel, in this question, when we have 2 contingent remainders, right? What does O have? Mm-mm. No. Nick, what interest does O retain after he's given away a life estate?
No interest? Or
When you no, he does. Right? Oh, actually, hold on. 1 second. Being already dead. We're just... Yeah, no. O's got. No, I think O is. 1 second. I have something in my notes I don't think is right. What if? I think the answer is O is nothing. Yeah, I wrote this wrong in my notes and I just figured it out. So withdrawn. Yeah, O's got 0. Okay. O has no interest. What? See, I have in my note. Oh, wait a minute. B, 1 second. Then to B and their heirs. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, if anything, B's heirs would take. So I think O gets. Yeah. I had it wrong in my notes. Okay, I'll fix this later. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, B has nothing in this one. Okay. So Marcel, apologize, a trick question. Yeah. Okay, but your other answers were probably the interest in the transferees, where I'm asking about the interest in the grantors. All right. So let's try again, Nick. I'll apologize to you. I'll come back to Marcel then. All right. So let's say 2 years later, right? So now we have 2 children are born, C and D. Okay. So let's revisit this entire analysis, right? It says to A for life and to A's children and their heirs. Is this remainder now vested or contingent? How do we characterize this remainder here? We know it's a remainder because it comes after a life estate. Is it vested or contingent?
I mean, there are 2 children, but he could possibly have more children. Yeah.
Right, but is anyone ascertained? Are there any named children? There are.
But
Who are C and D?
A's children.
No.
I don't know.
Nick, are there ascertained heirs?
Yeah, I thought it was C and D.
Okay. We know the names of at least some children, right? C and D are named. So at this point, right? So at this point, Nick, is this remainder vested or contingent?
Vested.
Okay. So A's children have a vested remainder. Okay. Now, Carson, what was that trick I told you? When you have a life estate and the first remainder is vested, what comes after that? What's that pairing?
Executory interest.
Perfect. Executory interest. Okay. When you have a life estate and the first one is a vested remainder, what comes afterwards is an executory interest. So actually B and their heirs have the executory interest. Everyone see that? Right? So under the second variation, right, where C and D are born, A has a life estate. A's children and their heirs, they have a vested remainder. But let's be more precise, right? I think we're done with this. So Mario, back up. So if we know that the B's heirs has an executory limitation, executory interest, how do we describe A's remainder? It is a vested remainder, but what comes afterwards? Let's walk through this, right? Yeah? Exactly. Let's write this out, okay? So this is question 1. And then this is 1, I guess, A, right? So we know that A has a life estate. We know that B's, A's children have a vested remainder. We don't know exactly what though. We say that B has an executory interest, right? So then we know we have to go back and fill in. This is a vested remainder, whoops, in fee simple, subject to an executory interest. Okay? I know this is not easy. Let me walk through this one more time. What makes this question so difficult is you need to jump around significantly. A has a life estate, right? We know that B has executory interest because they can take it away. So what comes in the middle is a vested remainder, but it's a vested remainder in fee simple, subject to the executory interest. So hand, Chad.
Wouldn't they still be contingent because the children have to survive?
If you have one person who's ascertained, that's enough for now.
So if they did die,
Let's do the next question. That's the next question. You're jumping like a minute ahead. That's okay. You can read ahead if you like. Amanda's your hand up? Or Emily? Anyone? Okay. All right. So let's do one more. John, what kind of executory interest does B have? Is it shifting or springing? Who's getting cut short? The grantor or the grantee? Exactly, right? B has an executory interest because it's a shifting, because the grantee is getting cut short. Okay? Everyone see that? I admit you, this is not easy. You need to go step by step and sometimes go backwards and forwards, right? And let's walk this again, right? We know A had a life estate. We know that the children had a vested remainder, okay? We know that after a vested remainder, you're going to have some sort of executory interest, right? Once we see that's an executory interest, we say then it's subject to the executory interest. You have to jump around. And at the very end, we say it's shifting. It's this weird roadmap, and I can't map it out because it's going to be different in every single case.
If we go back to the beginning, where it says all companies wait for life into A's children and their heirs,
why do you say that that's a contingent remainder? I know you're saying that because the heirs are not as certain, but we just went over an example that has the same.
Because here we know that some of them are born. Oh no, I think that's an issue. Or wait.
Like I don't know. Like I'm kind of thinking, even without just by excluding the heirs are C and D, just like them to age children and their heirs.
Right.
Wouldn't that be a pretty simple subject to executory interest?
But it's in the future. So A has it for life, right?
Okay.
And then to A's children and their heirs, right? We know that's going to be a remainder because it comes after a life estate.
Oh, I know that. But
So the question is whether they're ascertained. And here we say we have C and D, so children are ascertained. That makes it vested remainder. We know the names of some kids. There may be more kids, and in the next, if you wait like 30 seconds, we do the other one, right? So the next one says, and this is Chad's question, which we didn't get to, right? Suppose that C dies, right, during A's lifetime. So one of the children dies during the lifetime, and that A is survived by B and D, okay? What happens here? What do you think? I appreciate your candor. If you guys are daydreaming about future interests, you guys are worse than me. Okay, so I'll help you out here. Okay. Yes. Okay. It will still be vested because there's still one child, right? Okay. So now let me add. This isn't in the book, and I always get in trouble. But let's imagine this one, and I'll go back to Chad because he asked this, right? Right. Let's say that both C and D die in a horrible plane crash on the same day while A is still alive. Is the remainder now vested or contingent? It becomes contingent again. So you see this weirdness, right? The same exact thing can be contingent, and then it can become vested, and then become contingent again. And depending on what B's interest is, contingent remainder, I'm sorry, depending on what the children's remainder, then the next one changes also, okay? And you might ask me, Josh, why does it matter if it's called contingent or vested, right? Why does it matter if it's executory or whatever, okay? The reason why this matters is for what happens in our next class, because for a lot of years, contingent remainders were void, right? There are all these rules about destroying contingent remainders. So that's why it was really important to make it look like a vested remainder, even though it might actually be contingent. All these things which you guys are saying, well, it doesn't make any sense. These were all done as a way to not have stacked contingent remainders, right? When you have stacked contingent remainders under the old common law, they were destroyed. So you have to try and structure things in a manner in which you had vested interests followed by executory interests, right? This is why that history, which I didn't really bother boring you with, is important. You want to avoid having contingent remainders. You want to structure them like this. Today, it doesn't matter. You can have contingent, vested. They're basically all good with some limitations.
So if B has an executory interest, which would mean that C and D have a vested remainder, how does B get the link?
Say that one more time, please.
I might just confuse myself now.
No, I'm trying to follow you. Please say it one more time.
Like in the second example, when C and D are born and they're named, so they have a vested remainder.
Uh-huh.
That would mean B has an executory interest.
At that time, yes.
At that time. How does B get the link?
B would, well,
But it's a B simple because to their heirs.
well, it's possible they may die, though.
But if they die, then it's contingent.
But if they die, okay, so it says to A, I'm trying, okay, so it says to A for life and to A's children and their heirs, but if at A's death. So in other words, if C and D are no longer alive at A's day of death, then B gets it. If C and D manage to survive A's death, and then they get it for their heirs.
Right.
So B won't take it. The thing about a shifting executory interest is it doesn't have to happen. It may happen, it may not happen. B may never get it. It's a chance B may never get it.
I understand that.
I think, are you wondering because well, even if C and D eyes, they
Wait, just to talk this way. Lou, we talk this way, not back and forth.
Okay.
One tip for court, and this is one way to piss a judge off, is when lawyers start talking to each other. My judge was a very wise judge, very calm. But one thing he would yell at people and start talking to each other. So you talk to me, and I can go back to her. Okay.
Okay, so it seems, I wonder if what Emily is asking is that if C and D die, whatever, they still have heirs.
Yes, yes,
So
and their heirs
it
take
would
it.
be- Right, but C and D could die before they have heirs. If C and D are born and then they die when they're like 3, they don't have heirs.
They may.
And that's how, like, if they were the only kids born to A, then B would eventually get it.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at C, and we'll finish on this one. Okay. I think this might address something what you're thinking about, but maybe not. If you don't, you can come talk to me afterwards. Okay. So C says O conveys to A for life, then to B and her heirs. Okay. But if B is survived at his death by any children, then to such surviving children and their heirs, right? So we know that, again, here A has a life estate, right? All right, so what happens after a life estate? Let's go up to Tamer. How would we characterize in letter C the interest of B and her heirs? How would we characterize that? Exactly. How do you know it's a vested remainder? And is there any condition precedent? Good. All right. So now we're not done with being their heirs, but we'll come back to that later, right? But what happens next, right? What about what happens to C and D, the kids? How would we describe the interest of C and D? Exactly. So C and D have an executory interest. Tamer, how do we know it's executory? What's it doing? Snip, snip. Yes. We know that C and D have the executory interest. Now, Tanner, let's finish this up. Is it shifting or springing? Whose interest is it cutting short? Granted, yes. In virtually every case, it's going to be shifting. So if you have to guess shifting. I mean, you'll see a rare case where it's springing, but that's actually fairly rare. Okay? So now let's round it out. We know that B has a vested remainder in fee simple. Okay? But it's not fee simple absolute. What exactly is it, Tamer? Let's finish it on. What is it subject to? More precise. That's correct. I want a more precise answer. Specifically, what is it subject to? Yes. B and her heirs, they have a vested remainder in fee simple subject to an executory interest. I want to see that. What I'd encourage you is there are these review problems in the back. They have answers to them. After class, go and try and do some of them. And if you have questions, you can email me or go to office hours, whatever. But I like these because the answers are there, and you can check yourself before you wreck yourself. Okay? You will wreck yourself on these, then you can check yourself. All right. Any questions? All right. This is a hard topic, and we'll do more about this, but come talk to me if you don't get this, okay? All right. Have a wonderful day.